Welcome back to Truth Moment.
Welcome to Truth Moment. I'm your host, Tiara Pritchett, and today I'm in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia, where I wanted to bring a different opinion onto the show, so I invited a guest. When I sat down to create this guest intro, there was a list of things that, it was a mile long that this young lady does. She's a modern day Renaissance woman, so I could make a shorter list of things that she doesn't do. So I would like for my Truth Moment audience to help me welcome the very much so talented modern day Renaissance woman, Miss Akeia Simmons. Akeia, thank you so much for coming on Truth Moment.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Akeia, congratulations again for appearing in the Fed Women magazine, the July issue. And I noticed in the magazine you were talking about the importance of heart in your business. But in the magazine you shared with me, there were some things you didn't get to talk about. And one of those things was identity. So can you tell me why identity? Why is that important to you as to where you felt like it was something you wanted to express on Truth Moment?
Because identity tells you everything. There's so much in identity, and it's such a drastic shift when someone knows who they are versus when someone doesn't know who they are. And you will see the effects of both on both sides. So that's why it's one of my main targets that I like to deal with. It tells you everything.
Okay, so when in your life did you realize you were operating without one?
Very early on. I don't think I actually learned who I was or got the full scope of who I was until much later in life. And because of that, I hit so many pockets that I did not have to hit, and received so many consequences from those pockets and those many mistakes that I made simply because I didn't know who I was. And it wasn't until I learned who I was where my entire life shifted. So,
okay, so I have a question. You've heard people sometimes say they're in an identity crisis. They're in an identity crisis. Well, one of the things I would like to tell my audience that you do, Miss Simmons, she does mentoring, and so she does some counseling. So it's actually pretty interesting for me, at least, as a therapist, to have a counselor on Truth Moment. So how would you deviate from someone just having dysfunctions in their identity as opposed to an actual all-out crisis?
I learned early on that it is a relationship with I, which is my personal perspective of who I am, versus me, which is others' perspective of who I am, which balances out the relationship that I ultimately have with myself.
Okay.
And doing that as I mentor, it's easy for me to see or to recognize the challenges that come when the I hits the me and they start fighting each other.
Wow.
And it stirs up such a chaos on the inside. And one of my mentors always calls it the inner me, not the enemy, but the inner me battle. And I can easily recognize the inner me battle. And so once I recognize that, it's easy to kind of step out the steps. Okay, this is what needs to be done to get this person where they need to be.
That's wow, I've never heard it put like that, but I'm going to have to use that. I'm going to use that, for real. Don't worry, I'll give you credit for it, though. The inner me battle, I like that. And so, like I previously mentioned, you do mentorship. So tell me a little bit about that.
With my mentoring, I just kind of happed up on it, and as I look back, I've been mentoring since I was a kid, and I didn't really recognize it. But as I continue to grow, as I continue to have my pitfalls and get better, people recognize change. So they're like, hey, how did you do that? Hey, how did you do that? And young people just kept coming, kept gravitating. And I am a type of person, I didn't technically have anybody there to help me through the processes that I had to endure. And because of that, that caused more challenges and more layers. And so I promised myself, I told God, if I can get out of this, then I'll help anybody else who needs to get out of it. So I make my phone line available for all, really.
Your phone line, what's the name of your mentoring programs with your mentorship?
It's called Risen for Them.
Okay.
And that's exactly who I am. I know that everything that I've gone through, everything that I had to endure, I did it for someone else to get up on it or to get over it. So I call it Risen for Them because I believe that we're risen to help other people.
Oh, okay. And you are, along with you being a Renaissance woman, you have more than one. So just having one one mentorship program wasn't enough. She had to go out and get another one. So you have two.
I have two. The other one's called Straight Street.
Okay.
Risen for Them is for everybody. Like I want to reach like the masses with that. I don't care what race you are, what religion you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you want to be mentored, then Risen for Them is the way we do that. Straight Street is the fire part. That's the spiritual side. So it's to help. I believe our generation has so many unlocked treasures on the inside, and many times we're looking over it just because all we see is the chaos that they're providing. However, there's greatness on the inside of them, and it's my assignment to go get it.
Yeah. And so, how did you recognize that your life lacked an identity, or that you lacked your identity?
I recognized it when I saw myself falling into a variety of destructive patterns, across the board relationships, just choices that I made that I knew would produce more damage than good, yet still finding myself making these detrimental choices. At that point, because of the consistency of bad choices, I knew something was wrong, and something was wrong in me that I wasn't able to control on the outside of me. So I knew I needed to personally do some soul searching and find who I was. Okay.
Which is very interesting because identity gives us that sense of who we are. So Akeia says something all the time that I find really interesting that I want to share with you all. She says that your do becomes your who.
Right.
And that's huge with identity. It's her mantra, so to speak. Tell me a little bit about your do becoming your who.
Well, one thing that I noticed on this side of the fence, that people would take their bad decisions. Oh my gosh, I got pregnant at the age of 15, or oh my gosh, I'm a drug addict, or oh my gosh, I'm with this guy who keeps, beating me, or whatever the case, or whatever bad decisions that they make, and they take it personal like that's who they are. And a lot of the time I'd say that is the reason that they can't get out of it, because they associate themselves with their bad decisions, not recognizing that they always have the power on the inside to change the decision and then change your life.
Very good. Very well spoken about that. The first time you said that to me, I was like, man, why not think about that? But it was. I'm so glad that you shared that with me. So that helps me segue into a really important question. And so at what point did you allow your do to become your who and make you feel that death was your only way out?
Probably when I was in high school was my most challenging time of trying to separate my do and my who. And because I, at that time, didn't have the wisdom and the knowledge and the tools that I have now, it about overtook me. From even, as a young child, I was always searching for the Akeia that I always wanted to see, and see, do well and see, expand in my life. But because I wasn't able to see it, I disassociated that good part of me because all I saw was bad. So I wanted to kill the bad part of me, and the only way I knew to kill the bad decisions was to kill myself.
Wow. Well, with something so weighted, so serious as that, would you mind taking us there, taking us to that place that had such a huge hold, in order to have you feeling that death was the only way out, to where coming and going made you feel that suicide was your only choice?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's go.
In this next part of Truth Moment, Akeia takes us to the place where she became most aware of her actual desire for isolation and avoidance: high school.
So, we're here.
Yep, this is it.
Okay. Why is high school such a huge fixture for you when it comes to suicide and identity?
Because I never thought I would make it out of it. So high school was my do or die moment. It was either, Kia, you're going to live through these 4 years, or Kia, you're not going to make it through these 4 years. So I've learned, I have a concept of Tuesday to Tuesday. If I can make it to the next Tuesday, I'll be good. But it's where I failed numerous of times. Like I was arrested here. I almost didn't make it out of high school. My GPA was like totally below the charts. I didn't take any type of school as far as college prep courses because I didn't think I would make it to that point. So it was just a real defining moment in my life.
Okay. So would you say that aided in you wanting to commit suicide?
It's a good question. It's not necessarily that it aided me, but it did allow me to hide more. And I think suicide, because it's so dark, it's so hidden, it's wrapped in so many different layers that no one is able to see you or locate you. And that's a very dangerous place when you're talking about someone who's contemplating suicide.
Okay. And you said that you were arrested once. Did that give you enough? Did that fuel your fire? Give you more ammunition in your decision of wanting to do that?
Kind of what I was talking about earlier about making poor decisions and receiving the consequences. So it was an additional consequence to say, okay, see, this is another bad decision you made. What you're going to do with your life, you know. And I remember walking in this school after it all happened and thinking to myself, not wanting to talk to anyone, not wanting to speak to anyone, just wanting to stay in my bubble because it was my safe spot. While it was very destructive, it was very safe for me to stay there.
That makes sense. I guess even when there's chaos and turmoil, sometimes we still find peace because pieces can be flying all around us. But if we can find one thing to pull onto, to grab a hold to, and to lock down for shelter,
Right.
then it provides us with a form of covering or protection, if you will, when everything around us seems to be blowing all around. Can you provide me with an example of you as far as suicide is concerned?
I can actually go all the way back until I was about 8 years old, and I at that time was struggling with so many identity crises, trying to figure out, while I was young, I was very intelligent, and I was trying to figure out, why am I here? And it wasn't necessarily on a purpose mode. It was more so, is this really worth it type mode?
Wow.
And that's kind of what I've adapted even as I came to the high school. Like, you know, I can have this great life, but is it really worth living? Like, I just didn't like life in general. So I remember when I was like 8 years old and I used to stick my face in the tub and just hold my breath as long as I could. And at that time, I would say to myself, okay, I'm not going to kill myself right now, but this is just a demonstration that I want to.
Wow.
And then I would pull up and grasp for air.
Wow.
Yeah.
At 8 years old.
At 8 years old, yeah.
So, during this time, were you telling anyone? Were you leaving hidden clues or messages to anyone to let someone know that you were crying out for help?
No, because I wasn't necessarily crying out for help.
Okay.
It wasn't, okay, I have a problem, so I need help. It was more of a, let me close in and find what is this that I'm dealing with. I'm a thinker and was a thinker even at a young age, so I would think myself through things. So I wasn't even outwardly crying out for help, even though I needed it desperately.
Wow. So you battled suicide for so many years.
Right.
By yourself. So you didn't tell anyone, you didn't, leave messages, it was just Akeia.
By the time I got to high school, I would tell people.
Okay.
Yeah, I would tell some people who were older than me.
And what were responses? Do you feel like telling people, they were able to get you to not do it?
I would say when I told the right person.
Okay.
They were. Because, like, dealing with suicide, you already have trust issues. You don't want to share with anyone. You don't want to open up because suicide is so closed in. You know, it's all about me. It's everything about me, what's in my mind, what's going through my heart. So you don't really want to open and express yourself. So when I ended up telling the right person, I was able to actually get the help that I needed to get help.
Okay, what I want to do in this time, I want to take the time out to give Ms. Simmons the opportunity. Suicide isn't something that I've dealt with personally, but I have seen countless individuals who have. So I want to give her the opportunity just to speak to why do people choose suicide? Because someone who may have never thought about it or who has never been experienced with anyone who has thought about it or never sat across from anyone who's thought about it, they may think, well, that's a very selfish thing for you to do. So why do people think about suicide? And for a person who is thinking about suicide, do you see or do you feel that it's selfish?
People say that it's selfish, but I don't necessarily agree.
Okay.
Only because when you're dealing with suicide, there's an underlying pain that just won't go away.
Okay.
You can read all the books, you can take whatever you need to take, but at the end of the day, when you go home, there's still a pain that's on the inside of you. And you're trying to get out of that pain. Like, you're like, hey, I don't want to hurt anymore. I don't like what I see. I don't like how I feel. Suicide is very feely. It accompanies a very strong emotion that is very difficult to shake. And it's easy for someone on the outside looking in saying, hey, you need to look at it this way or you need to feel this way. Yeah. But it's not that easy just to say, okay, I feel better, let me do better. Right. So it's not something that I would consider selfish when you're in it. However, for the people on the outside that actually do love you and actually care about you, it's very easy to say, okay, that's a pretty selfish statement. But you just want to get out of pain.
Okay. So before we wrap today, do you have anything that you would like to say to anyone about identity or suicide before we get ready to close? Thank you so much for bringing us to your school and for taking us to the park. And one thing I wanted to speak about the park, the reason why the park was of such great influence, Ms. Simmons shared with me, is because it's her place for peace. She does a lot of her thinking there. So how appropriate for us to discuss identity when it comes to an issue of identity and you thinking about changing your do's so that you can change your who. What better place to be at than where she does her thinking? And she does her thinking at the park. So thank you again for taking us there. But is there anything you would like to share with our viewers before we close on today?
I think the only thing that I could share which helped me out is a lot of times we want our emotions to dull down so that we can make good decisions. And I had to learn how to do it opposite. If you ask anyone now, they'll tell you I'm very headstrong. But it's because I learned to operate out of making decisions and learning that my emotions will catch up sooner or later. And that would be probably my number one thing, even as it comes to suicide. And so you do this, kill yourself, take these pills, do this, do that. But you have to learn how to separate your decisions from how you're feeling. And that would be my tip point for that. And always, reach out for help, get help.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Again, she shared so much in detail with us today, and this was just our part 1. So join us next week for part 2, where we will get even more intimate as she invites us into her wonderful home, and we could not be more happy about that. So I'm Tiara Pritchett. That's my truth moment. What's yours? According to the National Institute of Mental Health, suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among teenagers and adolescents. So if you or someone you know is contemplating thoughts of suicide, please contact the number listed below. If anyone that you know has mentioned suicide or has even played with the thought of it, please do not hesitate to call the number listed below. It's a very serious cause.